Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. As you can see, we've started migrating towards the front. If you haven't yet, this is your cue to get a little exercise, the exercise portion of our show. Come on up. You're the next contestant. All right. Welcome to the Cottingham Colloquium. I believe we established, Peter, that this is our 8th year in running. I looked it up last night, and I hope my memory is good enough to hold that. So I believe it's our 8th year in running. Just a little bit of information about the Cottingham Colloquium. It's sponsored by Psychological and Counseling Services within the College of Education, Educational Psychology Department. The purpose of this program is to maintain this sense of excellence and leadership, which is a reason why this topic is so exciting and so pertinent for our group, for our students, for our alum, and so forth. But to maintain that in our program and it's the spirit that typified Dr. Harold Cottingham. Another goal is to help current students understand the ways that your graduate training can actually open diverse options to different professional fields. So every year we try to switch it up a little bit, whether it's focused on assessment or consultation or international opportunities or forensics or entrepreneurship. If you look back through our website, you can see the archives, you can see the recordings of what's gone before, but we try to mix it up so it just broadens your opportunities of what can I do once I've graduated? What are the options for me? It's also hopefully to build a stronger sense of community among our current students, our former students, our site supervisors, our alumni, our current faculty, our faculty emeriti, and so forth. So that's part of the goal. That was the goal of last night with the reception. At the end of today, right around 11, we'll have a pizza party, so there'll be more opportunity to network with individuals. So I hope you'll take really a good opportunity with that to meet and mingle and to network a little bit more, because the hope of this is that year after year we'll see the same types of faces along with new, and that it will feel like a family reunion each time, so that you're really blending with the community, but we're bringing the best out of each other and to each other. In 1956, Dr. Cottingham became the founder and the chair of our Department of Guidance and Counseling at FSU. He was a licensed psychologist and a founder of the Eastwood Counseling Center in Tallahassee. He had 2 bright, beautiful, amazing daughters who are still here right on the front row. So we've got Rebecca Montague and we've got Sarah Cottingham. Could you please stand for just a moment so people could see you and we could say thank you. Harold retired from FSU in 1980 and died in 1981 at the age of 67. And for years, the faculty and students and his alumni sought to establish a new program and a tradition that would honor his memory. He is why we're here. It was his vision that brought us here. So we were hoping to do that. So in doing that, Dr. Peter Scanlon, who's here at the front, helped to establish the Harold Cottingham Memorial Fund to support the colloquia on professional development for professional psychologists, counselors, and graduate students. Dr. Scanlon, would you stand for just a moment so we can thank you for your vision, for your support. Fall 2001 marked the first Cottingham Colloquium, and as I mentioned, we covered a wide range of topics. Today's program is viewed as an opportunity of bridging that whole town and gown mentality. We're, with the academics, with our community as well, in terms of the counseling profession, our relationships. It's also open to other counseling professions within the community, as well as alumni, friends, community members. And speaking of that, I just want to take a moment and see who we have in the room. I know we've got some very special guests, as well as the ones we've introduced. So if you're a current student, could you stand? Current student in any of our programs. Very good. Thank you for being here. All right, I see current faculty, retired faculty, if you could stand as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Do we have any alumni that are not, I can stand for both, but any alumni? Thank you. Wonderful. And what about speakers? And what about site supervisors? Community folks from the community that are here. I know there was a whole group. Thank you, right here, FCI, representing today. Thank you. All right. We also need to thank, we could not have done this without the support of 3 people in the very back of the room here. So Kevin Derryberry, he's right there waving at the coffee. He's monitoring that. Ashley Melton, thank you so much. She's the one that made sure we got here. She's the reason everything works seamlessly. So we'll give her a big applause as well. And then Rebecca Brewer, she is actually the recipient of the Cottingham Scholarship. So, and she's, with her help, has pulled this off as well. So let's thank her. All right, moving right along. Our first speaker graduated from the Combined Doctoral Program in 2010. She chose to blaze a trail within the medical psychology arena, starting with her predoctoral internship in Phoenix, Arizona, Phoenix VA, yeah, it is Arizona, VA Medical Center, which then led to a postdoc fellowship at the Primary Care Mental Health Integration, or PCMHI, if you like acronyms, at the Salem VANC. It was there that she solidified her interest in working in medical clinics and also discovered a passion for consultation and leadership. Currently, she serves as the program director of PCMHI and behavioral medicine. And if that wasn't enough, she's also the hospital's mental health performance improvement coordinator. But wait, there's even more. She is also the lead for North Carolina and Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic Veterans Integrated Services Network. At PCMHI. She's a trailblazer who leads others to connect and to collaborate in creative ways. With no further ado, please welcome Dr. Sarah Lucas Buyck.
Well, if you work for the government, you have to like acronyms, so get used to it. Thank you so much for having me here. I was very honored to be invited to this colloquium. And I'm just excited to be back in Tallahassee. I've not been here for 10 years, so it's changed. What hasn't changed is these curls that I forgot existed in my hair until I came back here. But it's just exciting to be here. It's really nice to see all of the current students who are in the program right now. There are a lot of you, and I look forward to talking some about my career path, about what I do and leadership opportunities in the VA. And I'm even more excited to hear your questions and kind of start a dialogue about how counseling psychologists and counselors can work in the VA and can kind of look at leadership experiences that are available out there. So I do have to put this again, in addition to acronyms, we have certain things in the federal government that we have to do. So what I'm about to say does not reflect the beliefs and opinions of the federal government. All right, so this first slide is probably the one I'm going to spend the longest on, but it's a description of what I do, although Deb kind of made it sound much more exciting than I might be about to. But what I do is I work in the country's largest healthcare system, which does mean it's a huge organization with a lot of potential leadership opportunities for psychologists. So I am the program director for primary care mental health integration, and I'll just call it mental health integration from here on out, and behavioral medicine. I want to talk a little bit about integrated mental health because I feel, well, a passion for it. I love it. That's why I do it. But also I feel like it is kind of the wave of the future. The VA has been doing integrated mental health for many years, and we're currently seeing a lot of community healthcare organizations getting on board and insurance companies trying to figure out how do we bill for integrated care, but it is something that continues to kind of get more popular and I think to have more opportunities for counselors. So integrated mental health at the VA includes having psychologists, LCSWs, psychiatrists, and nurses who are located in the medical clinics. So for example, the team that I work with has psychologists and social workers in our primary care clinics in the VA. So at Salem, we serve about 35,000 veterans in the Southwest Virginia area. All of those veterans come in for primary care, and every time they come in, they can request to see a mental health provider. What I love about this is that it destigmatizes mental health. We have a medical provider who is saying, hey, sounds like you're struggling with, kind of fill in the blank, weight loss, career decision making, recent divorce, or depression, anxiety. And I've got a psychologist right next door who can see you right when we finish. It's just a wonderful way to get veterans connected to those of us who are there to help them. So it destigmatizes mental health. It also helps with the wait time. I'll talk a little bit about my career path in a minute, but one thing that I love is crisis intervention, is meeting people where they are and being available when they say, hey, I need help. And this is a way to do that. The moment a veteran comes in and says, I'm struggling with something, then the medical provider can send them to us on the same day, no wait, to get them started. So we're catching them when they're saying that they have a need. We also have mental health providers who are co-located in our other medical clinics. So oncology, cardiology, our pain clinic. We have mental health providers in those clinics seeing patients with the medical provider. So if you were a veteran, you might go into your pain doctor and say, I've had back pain ever since I experienced a blast when I was in Iraq, and the pain doc might kind of find out more about your pain, and the psychologist or social worker would find out how that pain is impacting your functioning, how that pain is impacting your ability to have a job and keep a job, how that pain is affecting your ability to communicate with your loved ones and the people who want to support you. So we're able to provide that truly what feels like holistic care to the veteran. So that is mental health integration in the VA. Put a little plug out there for those of you who are thinking about jobs and internships. Every VA medical center requires having mental health integration. So there are these programs in every facility, and it is growing. Over the past 2 years, we've seen a huge number of new positions in these programs. There are also internships and postdocs and practicum experiences in mental health integration. I am also part of our training committee. So speaking of postdocs and internships and practicum, I am a member of the training committee. The VA is a huge psychology training employer. And so we have a lot of students who come through looking for experiences, whether it be a practicum experience to see, is the VA something I'm interested in, or an internship to really specialize, get a full year of experience, or a postdoc, so to get that year of experience after graduating to really specialize in something. We do have mental health integration specializations for postdocs. So in the VA, we're able to be part of training still. Get to work with not only counseling and psychology students, but also medical residents. So we have psychiatry residents as well as family medicine residents who rotate through. I love that piece of it because still get to see the students coming through, still get to be a part of supervision and development. So that is a leadership experience available in the VA. As Dr. Osborne mentioned, I am the lead trainer and the expert in primary care mental health integration in North Carolina and Virginia. So we have 7 medical centers, including Richmond, where our other speaker is from, who provide mental health integration, and I get to train all of those mental health integration providers in doing this kind of care that I talked about in a way that is effective. So last year I trained over 100 psychologists, social workers, health techs and psych techs, psychiatrists, pharmacists. It's a nice integrated or interdisciplinary team. I got to train them in providing mental health care in the medical clinics. And it looks very different than what we're used to. It's kind of similar to, I do think back to my days at the Career Center. It's similar in that it's not kind of this required 50-minute appointment where the person comes in once a week for 50 minutes and we're kind of digging into complex problems. It's really taking the patient when they come in, what brings you in today, finding out what is currently interfering with their functioning or currently interfering with them moving forward in problem solving and decision making, and starting with them to work on that. So we meet with them for 20 minutes to 30 minutes. It's a shorter appointment. It's flexible. They can kind of learn self-help tools and be on their way. Or they can come in for a few sessions to work on problem solving. And if that's not enough, then we might talk with them about getting into specialty mental health care. So if someone's PTSD symptoms are really interfering with their ability to get out of the house, that's usually kind of a need for more intensive treatment. So we might talk with them about what PTSD treatment looks like, how difficult PTSD treatment can be. So part of the job is talking with them about the fact that if you go to get PTSD treatment, you're probably going to need to talk about your trauma. And that's not easy for people to hear, because when we have a trauma in our lives, we often want to try to not remember it and push it aside and not talk about it. So part of the job is talking with veterans about what it means to have a trauma and how helpful it can be to actually talk about that trauma. So I love that part of the job, which is helping people to see how helpful mental health treatment can be and getting them kind of moving forward in their willingness to make a change and doing some motivational interviewing to help them move forward in their stage of change. As part of the SME for Virginia and North Carolina, I also provide consultation to our mental health integration programs in the 7 facilities that we serve. So it's being able to take the skills that I learned in this program, learn some wonderful skills in organizational consultation. Dr. Peterson, I'll shout out to you. And looking at systems and how to evaluate a system, and also how to then make changes in that system. It's not easy. I think we can all agree that on an individual level it's hard to change, and on a system level, change is difficult. So I'm able to use the skills learned in the program to provide some organizational consultation to other VA medical centers. So that's that piece of it. In addition to those areas, I'm also the coordinator for some of our accreditation. So in hospitals, similar to APA and KCREP and educational programs, hospitals have to be accredited also. So the Joint Commission is an organization that provides accreditation to VA and non-VA hospitals. And if you work at a hospital, you'll probably at some point hear them say, I think Joint Commission's coming next week. And they'll start tearing down all the posters on the wall and making sure all the expiration dates are updated. So the Joint Commission is an organization that evaluates hospitals, makes sure that they're doing what they say they're doing, and and also making sure that what they're doing fits with what the research and clinical guidelines say is helpful in hospitals. CARF is also an accreditation program that looks at behavioral health programs. So specifically we have compensated work therapy programs, residential PTSD and substance abuse programs, an intensive kind of day treatment program. They are all CARF accredited. So in that role, I take a look at the requirements that CARF says this is what an effective program in PTSD treatment should be offering, and I help that program to make sure they are meeting those requirements, because CARF comes in every 3 years to check on those things, make sure that we're doing what we say we're doing again, and that we're doing what the research in PTSD treatment or substance abuse treatment is saying we should be doing. Again, I use a lot of the skills that I developed in this program to provide this service. So being able to take a look at what the research says is effective, what organizations are saying are effective and clinically appropriate, and then consulting with programs to help them decide if they're doing that, and if not, help them with program development, help them to figure out what they need to do in order to meet those requirements. I am a member of the Virginia Governor's Challenge to prevent suicide among service members, veterans, and their families. Little sneak peek on a slide in the future, I'm going to say take opportunities when they come up for you. This is an example of an opportunity that just kind of happened to come up because we didn't have a suicide prevention coordinator at our hospital, and my boss said, we got to have somebody do this. Are you willing to do this? This was not necessarily my area of expertise and not a huge area of interest, and I said yes, because part of getting leadership experiences is taking leadership experiences. So sometimes that means doing things that you didn't sign up for, but it also means by doing those things you have other opportunities in the future. So the Governor's Challenge is 7 states who were picked by SAMHSA to work with their state legislation and their community and VA partners to implement programs to prevent suicide in service members, veterans, and their families. This is a nice example of kind of collaboration. So in the VA, it can sometimes feel like VA is all I do. I think in universities, it can sometimes feel like this university is all I do. And I encourage you to take a look at opportunities outside of the organization that you're in, because there are a lot of opportunities for collaboration if we're looking and kind of taking advantage of those things. What else? Oh yeah, I also provide some direct patient care. So I like to put that out there because sometimes it feels like we have to choose between admin, leadership roles, and being a direct care clinician. And 10 years ago when I graduated, if anyone would have asked me what I would be doing, I would definitely have said, I will be a clinician. That's probably what I'll be 100% of the time. I'll be doing clinical work. And at this point, I probably do 30% clinical work. But I do love having that piece as part of my job. So when you think about leadership roles, when you take a look at leadership roles or in interviews, when you're applying for internships and jobs, you can ask about, what is the ratio? Can I still do direct patient care? Because that is something that is often possible, and especially in the VA, I've seen that be very possible for folks. I'll give you a quick overview of my career path. So I grew up in Virginia, and the only way I made a college decision was is it like more than 3 hours away so that my parents, couldn't just stop by? I still want to be close-ish. I love them and love my family. And I'd like to go away a little bit. So went down to North Carolina and went to Wake Forest University where I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do. What I ended up doing was taking a neuropsychology summer school class and fell in love with it, which neuropsychology is not what I do, but just learning about how psychology can be a nice mix of research, biology, and the mind, and kind of taking all of that and looking at how it works together, which you all know that now, but at the time it was kind of a big deal to me, and I liked it a lot, so I got a major in psychology, and started looking at master's programs in mental health counseling. I wanted to have a master's, I wanted to do community mental health, and Florida State University had an awesome MS-EDS program in mental health counseling, so that's why I came here. And again, fell in love with it. This is what I do. So I enjoyed the mental health counseling program, got to work at the FSU Career Center, and thought, this really makes sense. Students are coming in saying, I have a need, and I get to help them right now. Kind of goes back to what I was saying I love about my current job. It's meeting students where they are at the time that they say, I'm ready for some help. So I ended up applying to the PhD program at Florida State and wanting to stay because I realized that what I would like to do in the future, a PhD would help me to do that. So while here, I had an assistantship at the Career Center and also worked at the Career Center and worked with the Victim Advocate Program. And I don't know if anybody here work with or, the Victim Advocate Program. Love that program. Similar, you're gonna hear me say this a lot, but kind of similar that getting to work with students right when they have a need. So the Victim Advocate Program offers assistance and crisis intervention to students who have been victims of some sort. So in that assistantship, I was on call overnight to meet students at hospitals or police stations when something had happened and they had reported being a victim. And that, again, it helped me to solidify the love of meeting people where they are. A student, patient, veteran has a need, and we're able to start working on it right then. I also learned that I really enjoyed working in hospital settings. So going to the hospital to meet a student, working with the medical providers who were also working with that student, and being able to provide a piece that maybe was missing if it had just been a medical provider. So when I applied for internships, I applied to VA and non-VA medical centers. I really wanted to focus on medical psychology or behavioral medicine. And I matched at the Phoenix VA Medical Center. That was my first experience with veterans. And what I realized there was that, don't tell my parents, but I'm a bleeding heart liberal. And to be part of a socialized medicine system was just wonderful. So I loved that I was able to be part of a system that doesn't discriminate. It's if you're a veteran and you need some help, we're here for you. And especially for those individuals who went into the military for a variety of reasons, you see a lot of comorbidities, or you see trauma in their history. So it was a way to provide assistance to this group of people who maybe would not have been able to get that assistance had they not had veterans care. Completed my internship and defended my dissertation a few days before completing internship. Don't do that. finish your dissertation before you go on internship. Just listen to your dissertation committee and do that. But graduated, I applied to postdocs because I did want to get a specialized experience, and went to the Salem VA Medical Center for a primary care mental health integration postdoc. And that's where I have been since then. So since 2009, I have worked at the Salem VA in a variety of roles, but in 2012, I got the role that I am currently in. When thinking about this presentation, I was kind of, I told you that, well, I went to college because I wanted to be 3 hours away. I was kind of thinking, all right, let me think more about how I made decisions through my career path, and try to be at least a little helpful to those who are trying to make career decisions. And what stood out was that I was originally making decisions based on my values. I knew what my values were, and here are some of those, but through all of this, these have been my values. And choosing psychology met those values. Choosing the VA kind of helped with that social justice value. I think being in mental health helps with that also. As I got experience, as I came to FSU and tried different practicums, so many practicums you guys are doing, right? But it's good because it helped me to figure out what my interests were. It helped me to know that I don't necessarily want to test people all day long. And it helped me to know that what I do like is working in a hospital setting, crisis intervention, collaborating with teams, early intervention and prevention. This is a strength of counseling programs, is taking a look at early intervention and focusing on that. And I think you all know this, but what we see over and over again is that catching people early on helps them to not have more complex problems. So whether it be helping them to not be unemployed or helping them to not have to go into an inpatient mental health setting, early intervention is just so helpful for people who are starting to have a problem. And also the systems approach. So being able to provide consultation. I liked that. I didn't exactly know that I would do anything with that, but I did realize that I enjoyed that. As I finished internship, postdoc, started feeling a little more confident in my skills. It's still happening, but I realized that I do have some skills that help me to be a good leader. So when thinking about, I think for me, what helps me to be a good leader is being flexible. So being able to go into different settings and provide the assistance that that setting needs, or the ability to meet with a variety of patients and be able to provide what they need. And integrated mental health, you're really dealing with whatever walks in the door. In the career center, you're dealing with whatever walks in the door, and being able to have that cognitive flexibility of, okay, this is kind of what's going on with this person, what can I do to help them in their current state. Ambiguity tolerance, similar, so being able to go into different settings, see different people, and know and be comfortable with that. We have interns who come through integration who say, I am not comfortable with this. I want to be able to do a chart review, to know who this patient is, and then to have a treatment plan kind of in my head before they come in. And that is great, and probably integrated care is not the place to be. I like flexibility, and I enjoy and am fairly good at working with data and statistics. So that piece of it is a little kind of difficult to mesh, because those can be two different types, but I'm able to do that and to work in a structured setting and applying literature to practice. You all are learning that in the program, how to read research, read the literature, and then apply it to what we're actually doing in the field. And specifically, I think counseling and counseling psychology focuses on recognizing strengths in others, so really having a strengths-based approach to treatment and to intervention. So some helpful hints for leadership. Don't find fault, find a remedy. I would say wherever you are, if you see a problem, that's fine, and part of expressing that problem or identifying that problem is to start thinking, what is a solution for this problem? Because that is a way in which leaders get identified. When I think about the staff that I supervise, the ones that I kind of pull into leadership experiences are those who come to me with problems, and that's okay. It's great to identify problems in a system, but those who are also able to identify potential solutions. Don't take yourself too seriously. So that, I guess that's just a life helpful hint. You'll make mistakes. There will be shortcomings. There will be people who don't like the way you lead, and that is part of it. Take leadership opportunities when they arise. So avoiding that's not my job description. I unfortunately hear that a lot. That's not what I signed up for. Or even kind of, here is my job description that you gave me when you hired me. Nowhere in there is, fill in the blank XYZ duty. So what I recommend to everyone is to not use that. It can be useful if you're being asked to do things that are not appropriate, and when you're being asked to do things that are a little different than what you signed up for, think about, how is this helpful to the system, and is this something that I can be helpful with? And if so, take it. That's how you will be identified as someone who can lead a program or a new intervention. If you don't take them, then it's hard to get them in the future. I didn't have a slide for this, but I was thinking what to look for in an organization. I really appreciate the VA because we have a lot of psychologists in leadership roles. In 2008, Veterans Affairs kind of officially said, okay, when we have mental health leadership job postings, we have to advertise not just to those physicians out there who are wonderful, but not just to psychiatrists. We also need to take CVs from psychologists, LCSWs, and nurses. So they opened up the field and made it a requirement to recruit from all of those areas. And what we see now is that many of our national leaders in mental health at the VA are psychologists. And I think because of many of the reasons I listed previously, we've got great training in what is needed to make a good leader. So I highly encourage you to look for organizations that value counseling and that value counseling psychology. Ask them about it when you're interviewing. Ask them about leadership roles that are available to the counselors in the system and to the psychologists in the system. And if they say that they do value it, take a look at their leadership structure. Are there opportunities available to counselors in leadership positions? Are there people in those positions now who are counselors? So kind of, do they walk the walk? Not only can they talk the talk in your interview, but do they walk the walk when you take a look at their leadership structure? So potential drawbacks of leadership, I had to add this because I've had a kind of push-pull relationship or approach avoidance maybe with leadership, that there are some drawbacks. I have to admit, I have some empathy for Michael Scott, who wants everybody to love him. I get that. And as a leader, that's not gonna happen. I will guarantee that not everybody is going to love you, and being okay with that is important. Having different boundaries with coworkers. So I enjoy the people that I hire and would love to hang out with them and kind of be friends with them. And then that's different when you also, at the end of every year, have to give somebody a rating and have to tell them things to do at work. It makes those relationships difficult and kind of complex and complicated when you're friends and you have to be somebody's boss. So people kind of choose those boundaries differently. My boss, when he got the job that he's in, he said, I completely defriended everybody on Facebook who works at this hospital. I was like, well, that's a way to do it. You're really setting that boundary. And I didn't necessarily do something that structured, but I do kind of think about what would happen if I was friends with someone who ended up needing to be disciplined. That feels very uncomfortable. So thinking about those things. Leadership isn't always about innovation. So I love being part of program development and part of program evaluation, and that's exciting. And there are a lot of meetings that go nowhere, and there are kind of these documents that come down from someone somewhere that says every VA has to do this, and you have to do it, whether it makes sense or not. So there's that piece also. Change management can be difficult. Again, change is not easy, and being the person who's encouraging change is not easy also. So that's part of change. And needing to be assertive and holding others accountable. Not necessarily a drawback, but it is something that for me anyway, I had to adjust to. That isn't necessarily my personality, and so I had to figure out, so who am I as a leader, as someone's boss? How do I fit that into my style and my personality? So that's something that can be a struggle for a lot of people. It can happen, but it is a transition to kind of think about and figure out. Let's see. So this is a video. It's not just a picture of Brad Pitt, although that would be
First guy through the wall. He always gets bloody. Always. It's a threatening, not just a way of doing business, but in our minds, it's threatening the gang. But really, what it's threatening is their livelihood. It's threatening their jobs. It's threatening the way that they do things. And every time that happens, whether it's a government or a way of doing business or whatever it is, the people who are holding the reins and their hands on the switch, they go batshit crazy. I mean, anybody who's not tearing their team down right now and rebuilding it using your model, they're dinosaurs. They'll be sitting on their ass on the sofa in October watching the Boston Red Sox win the World Series.
So has anybody seen Moneyball? It's a great movie. I highly recommend it. This is from Moneyball. It's based on a true story. The Brad Pitt character is managing a baseball team, learns about this new model of hiring baseball players that's based on statistics. Everybody says it's an awful idea, and he buys into it, he implements it, and the Oakland A's end up doing really well with it. The Red Sox adopted it, and they won the World Series. It's a great movie. And I love this piece of it where he's saying, when you have something new, you're trying to implement something new, a new theory of career development, a new program that kind of questions the way mental health providers meet with their patients, it's difficult. And there's going to be pushback. And part of leading that is to know that what you are supporting or pushing matches with what you value. and matches with what you know is the right thing to do. So kind of wanted to end with that it's not easy, and go with your heart and with your gut and make change and lead where you feel it's needed. And don't forget about all of the people who you met here. So those are some pictures from back in the day, FSU holiday party. Connect with people. Careers are important, and relationships and family are so much more important. So keep in mind when you are figuring out what you want to do, when you're moving ahead in life, remember those who are there for you. And when you hear about work-life balance, actually do it, because it's so important.
Inspired as I do in terms of leadership opportunities, paying attention to the options that come available, and being assertive and grabbing hold of those when they come. Thank you so much. Our second speaker graduated from the combined doctoral program in August of 2001 with a specialization in rehab psychology. He spent over 25 years in higher education, including the University of Houston and the University of Central Florida. Whether being selected as a fellow for the American Counseling Association, investing in our students through the Dr. Andrew P. Daire Endowed Dissertation Fellowship, or serving as the Dean of the Virginia Commonwealth University, he has been blazing the trail of leadership in psychology and counseling throughout his career, and continues to shine bright today. Please welcome Dr. Andrew Daire.
Does give fantastic introductions. I mean, I never thought of myself as blazing anything. Thank you all so much, for having this opportunity. Thanks to the Cottingham family. As a dean, I recognize the importance of donors and folks taking leadership and creating these types of opportunities for students. And so I just wanted to start with that. I've always been a staunch advocate, supporter for what we do in counseling and psychology. And I think sometimes that might come across as criticism, because when I look around as I've continued to move and navigate in different positions, I consider myself a student of leadership. There's a lot of folks that are poaching from our field. Solution-focused selling. The corporate industry takes a lot of what we're doing, and I think we value the work that we do, but I don't know if we fully appreciate the significance of the work that we do in counseling and psychology in all aspects of society. So it's almost like, how do we create these opportunities? And that's what I really love about this topic, to really help us have a deeper appreciation about how our training is really some of the best training to prepare you for so many different roles. You think about the fact that we've got career development as part of our role. Working in groups, learning about systems, learning about consultation, learning about psychopathology, learning how to motivate. I mean, this is just integral for a leader, for a manager, and even for a human being. When I think about what was a defining moment for me, and I've had many, I went to a small private liberal arts university, Stetson University, and I did my undergraduate there, my master's, and I worked in the counseling center. And I had a supervisor, Dr. Judy Wright, who was her supervisor for her training was a student of Murray Bowen. And so I was very early on kind of indoctrinated, so to speak, in Bowen family systems. And so I've always had that lens. But my supervision experience was a very powerful one that focused on my growth in order to best help my clients. So I can only help a client to my level of differentiation, right? So my level of functioning is really going to be the limit for how I can help clients. And so that's always followed me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal leadership philosophy, some basic foundational principles of Bowen family systems, foundational principles of transformational leadership, and how that relates, and the combination of those two, how that relates to leadership, and even how strategies in counseling and psychology helps to combine those two. When I was at University of Houston, I had a grad assistant who was an engineering student that just did the wickedest slide decks. So I literally take the slide decks and I just update them for different presentations. Please know, I am not this sophisticated. I miss that guy. You know, when I left Florida State, I went to University of Central Florida. I took a different route. I did the academic route. And I really loved being in higher academia because I really wanted to do everything. I wanted to do clinical work, I wanted to teach, I wanted to do research, I wanted to mentor, and I was really able to do that. I started the UCF Marriage and Family Research Institute, and that really became the hub of that work for me. Was, you know, built a fantastic team and was successful in federal grants, about $15 million in grants under the Administration of Children's and Families, and also had an NSF grant in career development and STEM. I still keep like maybe a limb, maybe an arm or a leg in career development. But what was important for me in really intentionally starting that institute is really having a place where we can impact and grow, where we can grow an organization to have an impact in the community through having an impact on the folks who are working in the organization. And that was really the culture that we worked to create. And so it really is the DNA of my leadership, values, philosophy, and approach, is that we must model excellence, innovation, and impact. And if there's an Achilles heel that I have, is I don't know what to do with average. Like, I don't know what to do with folks who are just complacent, you know, so I probably need to do some work on my developmental approach with that. But I really believe that we must model excellence, innovation, and impact in our work, especially if we're doing work that's leaning in to folks who are marginalized, or folks who are vulnerable, or folks who are suffering. Because those vulnerabilities, those sufferings, those marginalizations are not average, so we're not going to meet them with average efforts. So we also need to be bold and aspirational, and boldly aspirational in what we want to do. And then third, the organizational culture is critical. And I think as a leader, that can become your most challenging job, but your most rewarding job, is how do you create an organization culture that focuses on people development. And so that really is one of the things that's most important to me. It's a core belief as a leader, is that the personal and professional development of the team has to be just a little bit more important than the high expectations you have for deliverables and outputs. And what I've learned and realized is that when you do that, the deliverables, the outputs, the work of the organization or the work of the unit is actually better than if you focus on the deliverables as a set outcome. And so it's really a shift in thinking, but it's really a heavy, heavy nod to Bowen Family Systems. And if you've ever had the opportunity to be supervised from someone from that standpoint, right? Supervision for me, and when I supervise folks, supervision for me begins with doing your 3-generational genogram. And so the person comes in, your supervisee comes in, and they talk about a stuck point that they have with a client, and you literally go to the genogram to see where's the stuck point in your family of origin that relates to that stuck point that you're having with your client. So really this approach as a leader is a heavy nod to that we've got to focus on that team and focus on the personal and professional development of that team. And that's where even inclusive excellence comes in, right? We all, the sexy term now, we've moved from multiculturalism to diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So, and I won't go on a soapbox, I can do a whole other, if you want a Debbie Downer soapbox, you can bring me back and I can do a Debbie Downer soapbox on the co-opting of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if we really truly think about inclusive excellence, it really speaks to this. How do you create an environment where everyone can be their authentic self, right? Regardless of sexual orientation, race, gender, religion, etc. And so, as a leader, this is where inclusive excellence for me comes in, is how do you really support people and support their development? And so for me, the key phrase is, you need to leave the unit better than when you came, and you need to leave the unit better than when you came. And so being in a higher education setting, I have an expectation that people are going to leave, right? You want people to graduate and go on to other things. My view of it, my view as a dean is a little bit different from other deans, and I think that trips people up a little bit in that, I want to develop talent to where folks want to poach them. And my challenge is creating the organizational culture where they don't want to leave. Right? So that's how, as a dean, I have to work on my development, because if I'm focusing on creating and supporting, right, from an inclusive excellence lens, creating and supporting people being their authentic selves, while they strive for excellence, innovation, and impact, while they're boldly aspirational in their intent and their desires, with a focus on their personal and professional development, then the challenge for me is, I need to be able to step up my game as a leader to make sure that they don't want to leave. Because there's always folks out there to pay people more. So money is important, but at the end of the day, we all know this from career development. I mean, people, they leave bosses, they leave supervisors, they leave culture. They don't necessarily leave for a couple $1,000, right? So it's really, how do you help to support the personal and professional growth of folks, that while they're there, they're going to leave the unit in a much better place, and they're actually growing and developing, that when and if they leave, that they're actually better for being there. So Bowen Family Systems is a theory that conceptualizes the family as an emotional unit, a network of interlocking triangles. Well, this is the same for teams and organizations. Teams and organizations are groups of emotional units and interlocking triangles. And so, we'll see in the next few slides how there's so much about Bowen Family Systems. What exists in the family unit is very similar to what exists in the workplace, right? So concepts such as differentiation of self, emotional triangles, and over-adequate and under-adequate reciprocity, or over-functioning, this all exists within family units, but they also exist in organizations and teams. So if we think about differentiation of self, a process of developing an intellectual, emotional sense of self without losing connection to others, right? So you can have a parent or a supervisor, right, who nurtures someone's development, who gives them the space to make decisions, to make mistakes, right? You know, you're not gonna send your child out to drive drunk though. You're gonna, you know, so there's certain mistakes that you're probably gonna not have them make, but you wanna give folks space. And it's the same thing that occurs in organizations. As a leader, you wanna support the development of individuals versus an old, you know, a parent that does not give that child space, right? That has their thumb on that child, which can be very similar to a dictatorial, you know, leader who is not really supporting the development of their employee. And even in that sense, you know, where that can lead then to fusion, right, enmeshment. So you could have a leader that's excited because they have people on their team that buy into every single thing they say and don't have a view or an opinion or a thought outside of them, and a poor leader will think this is awesome. A good leader will be very, very concerned if people that they work with don't have independent thoughts outside of themselves. Or it can lead to emotional cutoff, right? Where then you have folks where they're just gonna come into work and leave, right? Which an emotional cutoff is, you know, it's technically not an emotional cutoff. You know, it's a pretend, a fantasy maybe. Emotional triangles. Bringing a third person into an emotionally negative situation, you know, which might have a false sense of relieving that stress, right? So you have a conflict with someone, right? And usually if I have to address a conflict with someone, the stress or the anxiety about the situation continuing has to become greater than the fear of speaking to that person, right? Or, you know, and when that happens, that's when you're like, okay, I gotta have this conversation. But when there's an emotional triangle and you bring somebody else into it, it decreases the intensity of the stress in that situation. Thus you kind of feel like, okay, it's okay, I don't necessarily need to talk to this person. That's one example of how an emotional triangle blocks that opportunity for your growth and your differentiation of self, because you've actually challenged yourself, learned and grown from that challenge of reestablishing a boundary with someone, having a difficult conversation, right? And so we have to really be careful with emotional triangles in ourselves as a leader, but also as you have constituents, folks who are on your team. Is there a sense of safety within that organization where folks can have difficult conversations with each other? Creating that type of a culture in an organization decreases the likelihood of emotional triangles. And that's why organizational culture is so important, because if you as a leader don't model that or don't intentionally work to support a culture of personal and professional development, not just from me, the leader, the dean, whatever, but for everyone, that faculty, student, staff also need to value my personal and professional development. And so when you have a culture where folks are comfortable having those types of conversations, then it decreases the likelihood for emotional triangles, right? Those emotional triangles can lead to staff splitting, negative atmosphere, negative feelings. And so how do you teach and use that? The work that I've done is in couple and relationship education. I actually, and I do it not in a covert way, but you know, when I came in as dean, I did some presentations on just my approach and my philosophy. And really what I was talking about is really strategies, some evidence-based strategies from couple and relationship education. I end all my faculty meetings where we do about 15 minutes of appreciations, where everyone appreciates each other. So it's some intentional work to create that culture. I thought I saw a hand raised over here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Zaria Gilbert, and I was wondering, with emotional triangles, couldn't that kind of be a supportive structure in an environment that communication is something that's welcome, having a third person to kind of bounce ideas off of before you enter a stressful
different than an emotional triangle. So for example, if there's something that Janet did that bothered me, and I'm upset, Janet, you've never done anything, at least that I can remember that's upset or bothered me, but I'll just use you as an example. It's one thing if I'm going to someone and I'm like, you know, I gotta have this really difficult conversation, and you know, Janet's a faculty member and I'm kind of scared, you know, and that person is helping to walk you through, you know, so here's what you want to do. You maybe want to think about the 5 ways to say I, you know, talk about, you know, the behavior and your feelings, and, you know, so it's one thing if somebody's going to help you do that structure versus if I'm going to come to you and I'm like, can you believe Janet did that, and da-da-da, you know, and then I'm complaining to you about her. That's an emotional triangle. But if it's a conversation to help you actually have the conversation with that individual, then that's more supportive. Thank you for that question, though. Over-functioning. You know, in an organization, it can be great. You know, this person, they come in and they just take charge and they get things done. But if they're doing somebody else's job, that's problematic. That person's over-functioning in that organization. So as a leader, although from a deliverable standpoint, it may be great, right? Somebody's doing something, but that can become problematic in an organization if you're supporting and even rewarding someone's over-functioning behavior and not addressing the folks who are, or the individual who is under-functioning in an organization. And so I think it can cover up those missed opportunities, right? Those weak points, those points for development and growth. And so I think that's another important consideration, is looking at the over-functioning. And so just some final thoughts is that, you know, an organization and teams, really, they're a system. And they're a system that on one level, if we look at it, that an organization or unit will only be as strong as its least differentiated person. It really gets you reoriented to think about, in a workplace, if we treat it, if we conceptualize it to some level like a family unit, right? Drawing from our skill sets in counseling and psychology, it can really help us to then individually work with folks, provide them the mentorship, the guidance, and the supervision so that they can be strong in their organization. Because a parallel process also exists, and that's the challenge. I mean, you know, I'm a couple and family researcher, that's my area, and so, you know, if you talk to other couple and family researchers, we'll say that couple and family therapy is more challenging than individual because you've got more people in the room, right? Well, when you embrace this approach within an organization, you know, each employee is bringing their family of origin systems, their baggage, right? And it's not like TSA where, you know, you're only allowed 2 carry-ons. I mean, folks are coming to work, you know, with a lot of stuff, right? You know, that becomes even more complex and more challenging. And that's why we're really seeing a lot of leadership look to counseling and psychology theories and models, right, to help support what they're doing in leadership. Now, transformational leadership, which is a leadership strategy that I espouse to, is, you know, and it fits for me, and I think particularly for somebody, you know, in counseling psychology, it fits because it's about motivation, it's about morale, and it's about productivity, right? So how do we consider the individual needs of folks who are on the team? How do we get to know folks on the team? How can we intellectually stimulate and challenge folks to help increase their motivation? How do we increase morale? What's the culture we're creating in that workplace? Are we valuing people? You know, appreciations are big. There's significant research really done on appreciations and how it impacts dopamine and oxytocin levels. So we know scientifically that appreciating someone has a physiological benefit. How do we make sure that we're doing that within an organization? How are we having transparent, healthy communication within an organization? And all of these things work to increase morale. And then fostering productivity. You know, a shared understanding of the team mission. Are we working together and collaboratively to identify a team mission so there's shared understanding, a shared collective feel that we're all working together towards the same outcome, and then recognizing and rewarding folks for their hard work. And so we have to lead by example. You know, transformational leadership not only improves the motivation, morale, and productivity of the team members, but it also does that for the leader. But we have to fully commit to it. It's not something you can say, well, you know, I think sometimes I'm gonna increase morale, and sometimes I'm gonna tear you the hell down. Like, you really can't do that, right? You gotta fully commit to it, right? So when we look at combining the two, which is really counseling and psychology strategies, because again, you can't go halfway, right? You really have to fully commit to it. Process is more important than content, right? We get that in our clinical training. A client comes in, you know, we want to help them understand, you know, from a process standpoint, and that takes time. You know, that takes time. You know, so, and again, I'm a fan of solution focused and, you know, those types of approaches, but sometimes there's some issues where, you know, it really takes some time and it becomes more challenging as a clinician, because you could tell a client what you think they need to do or what they need to understand, but it's so much more powerful when you can take that client, help to facilitate a process for them to have that realization, which sometimes it's not what you thought, right? And even if it is, it's so much more powerful when they realize that on their own. And so that takes time. And so, you know, that similar type of process we need to do as a leader. Immediacy. You know, we talk about immediacy and working with clients. You want to address issues with a sense of immediacy in a counseling session. You want to work with your clients to really address, you know, issues within their personal lives with a sense of immediacy, but also with a sense of transparency. And I cannot underscore the importance of critical reflection as a leader, right? That you know, you're not only fostering that in your constituents, but particularly as a leader, you have to do that. You know, one of the things that I find most challenging about being a dean is you have fewer people who are actually going to be open and honest with you about how they feel. And so I have to work so hard, right, to make sure that I'm modeling that and that I critically reflect publicly. You know what I mean? So if I'm thinking about something or I make a mistake, I'm doing that in a public way, in a faculty meeting. You know, I was really reflecting on what I said, and, you know, I think the way I said it may have come out a little too harsh. You know, did anybody sense that? Because I've been really reflecting on that. When you can model critical reflection as a leader, it creates a sense of safety within the organization for people to make mistakes, right? It creates a sense of safety in being vulnerable, right? I think this is my last slide, but I want to mention one thing since I'm talking about a critical reflection. It's really brief, and it's an acronym that from one of the developers of one of the coupling relationship education curricula. Her name is Lori Gordon. She actually passed a few years ago. But one of an acronym she came up with, which I think applies in personal relationships and it applies in organizations, is if a culture can be created within a relationship, within an organization, within a couple, within a family, right, where individuals feel safe to be vulnerable, right, and that vulnerability can be met with empathy, right? And if we can have a loop of vulnerability and empathy, that is the acronym for love. Loop of vulnerability and empathy. And so, not only within your own relationships, But within an organization, right? And obviously I'm not talking about romantic love in a workplace, you know, but when we can have an organization, right? And as a leader, when you can facilitate an organization using the strategies that we have, right? That we have in our training as counselors and psychologists, we can create that organizational culture of vulnerability and empathy that allows people to be their true, authentic selves. And that will actually lead to a higher level of impact and productivity in an organization, and also a high level of folks feeling appreciated and valued. So thank you so very much. I've appreciated this time.
Thank you so much for encouraging us, for motivating us, and we appreciate your sharing those really practical strategies and how much of it comes back to the individual who you are and that benefit of being a leader and reflecting those in your organization, but also yourself. Love the balance. We are excited this year, and actually in recent years, to see more growth within our students in terms of leadership. And so I want to take a minute, or a few minutes actually, to have our representation from 3 of our groups. Actually, there's 2 that we're having one representative for 2, so coming up and sharing a little bit about their stepping up, their story in terms of why I chose to be a leader for this organization, and to share a little bit about opportunities. Both of our speakers today talked about look for opportunities, take those opportunities. So I'm thrilled to have our student leaders come up and share just a little bit about opportunities that exist right here in the program while you're right here in your academics. So let's see, I'm not sure. We've got Caitlin and Noelle and Megan. So if you all want to come up so we can go right up there.
Hi everyone. How many of you have ever heard the adage, be the change you want to see in the world? Most of us, right? Such a huge statement, such a heavy-weighted phrase. But in my own life, I like to make that phrase a little smaller. Be the change you want to see in this room. Be the change you want to see in your family. Be the change you want to see in your cohort. And that is the mentality that led to the genesis of the Counseling Student Research Association. So it started off as a group of students, master's level, who were interested in pursuing the thesis route. And as most of you master's level students know, the thesis route for master's students is neither popular, expected, or mandatory. So we formed somewhat of a thesis support group, and we were like, I'll hold you accountable, you hold me accountable. But as the months went on, and more people fell off the thesis train, it became evident to us that the goals of our coalition have changed. So no longer was it a thesis support group, but now it was more of a research collaborative effort. So now our conversations went more like, I heard you were interested in suicidal ideation. Dr. SB's lab might be good for you. I heard you were interested in mindfulness. Dr. Doan's lab might fit you. So now our conversations, they diverted a little bit. And the more and more we exchange ideas, the more we realize that this is bigger than us. There are probably more master's level students interested in research that are beyond our cohort. So we thought, let's make this a thing, let's make this official. So that's how CSRA was formed, affectionately known as K-Sera. So before this year started, we had an outline of all of our presentations, our presenters, our topics. So far, we've already had Dr. Kyle from the Career Center come in and show us how to tweak our CVs and make it look presentable, how to tweak our personal statements. We had Dr. May come in last year and talk about pitfalls of applying for PhD programs, what licensure looks like, what life after graduation looks like. So we found so many practical benefits of things that we're sort of expected to know, but don't really know, don't really want to research in our own time. We've gotten it from this research organization. So we'll have elections opening in November for the spring. And I know you're probably like, why are positions starting in the spring instead of the fall? It's a little unorthodox, but the reason for this is this organization is a baby. We're less than 2 years old, so we want to make sure that the new leaders have a seamless transition into their roles. So you probably already recognize the first few leadership roles, but the last one is the group advocate. So that's sort of like the bridge between the group members and the outside world. So like I'm doing right now, we'll tell outside people about our organization, what we are, because people don't really know about us. And then people on the inside will advertise like upcoming conferences. That bottom picture is us in Orlando last year at the Florida Mental Health Association conference, and we didn't know it was a competition, but Florida State came in and we took first, second, and third place with our poster works. So it was pretty awesome. So we have other things like that going on. Yeah, so if you're interested, we would love to have you. It's open to master's level students. Doctoral students already have all the research help they can get, so we welcome you.
I'm a second year in the MS-EDS program for school psychology. So I'm here to talk about the Student Affiliates in School Psychology, SAS for short. We are a school psychology organization, obviously, and we aim to promote school psychology graduate students' professional development through collaboration with others, providing resources with others, and providing resources to the community, and promoting ethical and social responsibility to the specialty. We aren't as new as the other organizations, so we've been around for a little bit, but we are exclusive to both the master's level as well as the doctoral level, although I will say most of us are in the MS-EDS program, but come on over, doctorate students. So the reason why I chose to kind of pursue a leadership role in this organization is I think we can all agree that if we really have a passion for something, you want to try and be a part of that as much as you can, right? And I think that holds true for me as well. You know, when you tell people that you're in a graduate program, right, they're like, oh, what are you studying? I was like, I'm studying school psychology. They're like, cool. So you're going to be a guidance counselor? Well, no. You're so close, but no. So it's always nice to have that camaraderie, to be able to talk with people who know what's kind of going on in your field is always nice. We also provide mentorship opportunities within our organization, so the second years will try to match them up with another person who's already been in the field, or not in the field, in the program. So they can kind of collaborate with them, they can ask them questions, give them advice with professors and how they like to do things. We also have the ability to go to different conferences as well, which is that top left picture. We also participate in different things in the community as much as we can. We are working on being a part of Light the Night with FSU, which I believe is a walk for cancer. We also did the autism walk as well as NEDA, which is the National Eating Disorder Association. So we really just try to be a part of that community, spread awareness of of what school psychology is and how we can help our community as well.
I'm back. Okay, so this next organization is the Counselor Education Student Association, and a lot of people mix the one I mentioned before and this one up, but the delineation is that this one is more focused on professional development as a whole, so like post-grad, whether you're interested in research or a PhD program after graduation or not. So this one has an emphasis on networking and outreach. I believe we have a CAN drive in the works, but it's really focused on connecting one another. So this top picture is my graduating class. You'll see me on the left with the much fuller hair. That's not actually my real hair. And then the bottom picture is the class who graduated before us. So they were our mentors. And my mentor, I still communicate with her to this day. I saw my mentee earlier, Jamie. Are you here? Hey, girl. Yeah, so we put out an interest sheet, and then Janie and I we're both interested in women with eating disorders, and we're both really like avid dog lovers. So that's how we got paired. But I still reach out to my mentor, and that's how that networking piece goes. As you all know, the counseling field is relatively small, so networking is super important. We've already had our elections for this year, but next year, pretty much all of the positions will be open. President and vice president is pretty much reserved for the second-year students who have much experience, but we have a lot of positions open for the first-year students, such as like the secretary or the first-year social chair. So we welcome you all. Join us. CISA is where it's at, and CSRA. Bye, guys.
So I am happy to represent and introduce you guys to CHAOS, our doctoral student group. CHAOS is essentially representing counseling and school psychologists helping to advocate, organize, and serve. CHAOS originated as a reincarnation of the original student group, which I think was called SOSP. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really like that acronym, so I changed it. In order to serve our future health service psychologists, the aim of the organization is to provide professional development and community service opportunities for current doctoral students. So far, these events have included workshops and presentations on areas of interests, such as military psychology, advocacy, and theoretical interventions. This includes inviting alumni, such as Dr. Van Walker, to speak about their professional journey. We've only been grouped for about a year, so Dr. Walker came and talked to us about this time last year. And it essentially kind of spoke about his role as a military psychologist and what it would take for one of us when we graduate to get to that point and some of the benefits of that, and what that essentially kind of looks like for us if we wanted to pursue it as an option. We have also, this semester we will have alumni and ALC director Dr. Taylor Thompson, who's chilling out in the back, provide a talk on preparation for the EPPP, and community psychologist Dr. Morse of Morse Therapy Group provide a presentation on advocacy and psychology. CHAOS has also collaborated with Tallahassee Pediatric Behavioral Health, also chilling out in the back, on trainings and interventions. This semester we've begun piloting workshops specific for self-care, as well as one we've titled Culture Shock, which is going to cover cultural topics that are relevant and impacting our current clients, and in result, impacting us and our practice with them. Every year we also volunteer at the Leon County Family Early Screening Day to help assess youth social and emotional developmental stage. Graduate school in and of itself is, in my opinion, controlled chaos. Each of us as students eagerly embrace that culture of graduate school and all of its complexities. The CHAOS Student Group is a way to further our engagement and positively contribute to the progress of this program in our community. It also provides a supportive environment for this thing that we call grad life. The program is full of brilliant, passionate, and motivated individuals without whom the struggle would be all the more real. I took on this leadership position as founder and president because I saw it as an opportunity to further the relationships and experiences provided to us within our training. It started as founding a mentorship program for incoming students as a way to kind of ease that transition into grad life in a new city. Essentially, the individuals that have come before me have made a profound impact on me and continue to. And so we hope that by beginning that transition early for students, their ease into the grad program and the stress that is associated with that would diminish just a little bit. What started as an aid in transition expanded into an opportunity to advocate for new experiences within the program. I'll be the first to admit that leadership in and of itself does not require a specialized skill set, but an intrinsic motivation for progress, the collaboration of a team of individuals, and the patience to take every student and faculty member's opinion into consideration. The leadership position has been a stepping stone for my ability to conceptualize the truly impressive opportunities, experiences, and individuals that this program has, while also allowing me to build upon that reputation. It has also highlighted the professional network that comes from our practicum sites, community interactions, and alumni, allowing us to create relationships with professionals within the community whose specialty can then provide specific training to individuals, regardless of whether or not we spend time there or not. The most fulfilling aspect of this leadership position has been the collaborative nature of the role. Our workshops are tailored to the needs of the students. Every semester I ask them what they would like extra trainings in, or the things that they're concerned with that they would like to kind of help to fill that gap. And so in doing so, that collaborative nature, we succeed because students are engaged. And because students are engaged and they know what they want, and because we have this network of brilliant individuals, we're then able to be effective in providing these professional development opportunities. Being able, this role has provided me with many hats, representative, liaison, advocate for my peers have honestly become some of my best friends. And so the ability to kind of stand here and represent them is an incredible privilege. If you're interested in joining our leadership team, We do have a few current openings, like marketing and events president or events coordinator, and then eventually vice president. And at some point, I hope to graduate, so someone will have to step in for me too. And so if you're interested in joining us, our leadership team, which I see more of like a panel of wise elders, then let me know. If you're an alumni or community member who would like to present to us or collaborate on something, let me know that too. In the meantime, I hope that like you, or like us, we embrace the chaos of our professional life. Thanks, guys.
I think we should give our student leaders another round of applause. My name is Dr. Lindsay Jenkins. I'm faculty here in the PCS area. I'm the coordinator of the school psychology program and also a faculty member in the combined PhD program in counseling and school psychology. So my role today is to be a moderator of the discussion, which is essentially you ask questions and I repeat them if they didn't hear them. So we could go ahead and have our two guest speakers come back up and you can have a seat. I think the first question is, what is about Virginia? You're both landed in Virginia and came back to us today. Okay, so we're just going to open the floor to any questions that people have based on their talks or if it made you think of something. The floor is open. There is a microphone here in the middle. If you could just walk to the middle whenever you have a question. So not everybody all at once.
You may not be able to tell by my voluptuous frame, but I do CrossFit 3 times a week, and that is probably the single best thing that I do for my stress level. I don't know if there's any CrossFitters here in the room, but for me, I can't think about anything else but trying to breathe when I'm finished. So any stressor of the day is gone because I'm just really trying to breathe and survive. I work hard and I play hard. When I say I play hard, I don't do drugs or anything like that. I do like to, when I have the opportunity to spend time with my friends, which usually I try to be out of state. I just, to travel. I do enjoy boating. When I was at University of Central Florida, I had a ski boat. I drive an old car so that I'm able to afford a used boat. That's what I do.
Good question, and very important, whatever your job is. How about that? So good question. And whatever your job is, very important to think about how do I expand my life beyond this job, and how do I make sure to take care of myself. I try to be very mindful of what I am doing in the moment. One of my values up there was mindfulness, and that is something that helps me a lot at work, is practicing mindfulness. When I'm talking with someone that I'm supervising, or when I am taking a break to take a 10-minute walk around the VA campus, I practice mindfulness as much as I can. I also have things I love to do outside of work. And I'm fairly consistent or fairly good at leaving work within 30 minutes to an hour after my tour ends. And just kind of letting that go and being able to enjoy mountain biking with my husband or watching TV, going to movies, taking walks, making sure to be active and inactive. So having some active and passive relaxation.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
It's gonna walk all the way up to the side. It's really tall.
I feel your pain.
So recently in one of our supervision classes by Dr. Thompson, we actually talked about what can we do when family is not helping. When the support system is not helping in a child's mental health, even in a veteran's mental health, we know that we need our veteran staff support outside of just the VA. So I know that you were talking about family systems. Do you guys have any suggestions of how we can incorporate even systems outside the family to help aid in our clinical work? For instance, if we're working in the school system, helping school psychologists, guidance counselors, professors, in the veterans, helping community agencies, helping with the actual organizations that hire on veterans as an incentive. How can we get our systems to better support our patients or clients? Walk away. See you later.
That is something that can be really frustrating for us as counselors is when we have the individual in front of us and we're hearing everything going on that we're not able to see and directly affect. So that's great that you're thinking about that. In the VA specifically, for a long time, services were focused on veterans. And we only provide services to veterans and in a certain population of veterans. And in the past few years, the VA has been doing what you're talking about, which is recognizing what I think we all know, that families and support systems are what we see is the most beneficial for preventing suicide. When someone has a support system in place, then they're more likely to reach out to that person. So I would say what I've seen kind of working in this type of organization is collaborating with community partners. And part of this Governor's Challenge to Prevent Veteran Suicide is taking a look at what does the VA offer to veterans, what do the community service boards in the area offer to their family members, what does the workforce development and other programs contribute, what can they contribute for looking for jobs, identifying employers who target hiring veterans. So we've had all of these structures in place. We haven't done a great job of sharing resources and information. And we're finally doing that, collaborating, talking with each other. It seems like it sometimes feels like a competition of, well, if I'm at the VA and this veteran hears about this service for his spouse outside of the VA, then we're going to lose him because they're going to go to that service. And you know, if that's what is most beneficial to them, then that's what we need to do. And that's not what we see happen. What we see happens is the veteran gets care at the VA that veteran can get, and the spouse and family can get care at a community service board, and we're communicating with other providers. So I think sharing of information and resources and being willing to collaborate is important.
Just a few things that I'll add, and thanks for the question. You know, my area of research has been in couple and family stress, stability, and mobility, and really, when I got to UC, I started in terms of working with parents of kids with special needs and looking at the stress that those families go through. So my response will just kind of want to touch on two things. One, you know, people do the best they can with what they have. And so I think sometimes when families are not supportive, you know, we need to look at what's going on with that family. There could very well be their own issues, their own stressors, their own challenges that we then interpret as not being supportive. And if we have a conscious or even meta-conscious thinking or interpretation of the behavior as not supportive, that could influence how we approach that family. So, you know, how can we look at those behaviors and maybe try to resist some labels on those behaviors and you know, take somewhat of a compassionate approach? Because usually, even in the worst scenarios, or the scenarios, again, that we might see as worse, you know, we hear stories about the, you know, the parent who is passed out from opioid use and the 3-year-old child is wandering in a highway. You know, that's pretty bad, but that parent is really challenged and just totally consumed by their addiction. You know, so how do we look at what's going on with the family and to kind of take that stance? And then the second thing, and I see this a lot, you know, being a dean in a school of education, I've had to learn a lot about teacher education, and you know, we're an urban serving public research university, and you know, so a lot of the work we do, we're leaning in to communities with high levels of poverty that's been a result of structural and historical, you know, structural and historic marginalization, and you know, you hear some folks that, what I call it, blame the victim, right? You know, these parents, you know, don't show up to meetings and they don't show up to visits and consultations, and I think sometimes we need to look at how our own institutional bias creates situations where folks look like they're not engaged, they're not supportive. So in our organizational settings, we have to critically reflect on our own implicit and institutional bias, you know, that might be creating structures that result in certain populations not looking the way we have been socialized to think supportive and engaged. Even something as simple as what time of the day you offer things, is childcare available, et cetera, et cetera. Good question.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yeah,
It's okay, I'll just stand right here. I don't want to have to step over people, but I'll try to be loud. The first presentation in particular talked a lot about seizing opportunities or taking advantage of doors that open for you. And I'm a big believer in the notion that, thank you, that things happen for a reason. So I'm wondering actually for either of you, if you ever had an instance where a door actually closed, or you thought there was something that you were really supposed to do or you really wanted to do, and it just didn't work out, and kind of words of wisdom that you can give to us for navigating through those instances. You know, maybe something you would tell your former self if you could about that type of instance.
That's a good question.
I can give you many examples. One of the things that I am in an ongoing, continuous learning process, and it's amazing that I still have not learned this, right, is when a door closes, another one opens. You know, when something happens and we identify it or label it as bad, we have to be careful because whether something is actually bad, you don't know right after that event happens. It's maybe 3 months, 6 months later that you can reflect back and say that is bad. A few weeks before I defended, actually maybe about a month or two before I defended my dissertation, I had this cool little white Isuzu Impulse Twin Turbo, right? That was the car that I had when I was at Doctor. It sounds fancier, it was used, had a bunch of miles on it. And got in a car accident. I can't remember where. There's a road here where the sun is shining right in your eyes. I blew a red light, boom, car totaled. And I'm like, I can't believe this. I was married, had a young son who was like a month old, and I'm about to defend my dissertation. I'm a broke doc student, and my car was totaled. I would have not had the money to make it through those last 2 months and to have some money to actually help support moving to Orlando to take the job at UCF if I did not have the insurance money from that car accident. I can, and I'll just give one more. When I was at UCF, and I started the Research Institute, I did not feel like I had the support that I should have been given commensurate to the type of work that I was doing and the amount of grants that I had. Because of that, I developed and strengthened skills in engaging and working with the community and alongside the community, not just contact somebody in an agency in the community for participants for a study, but learn how to really co-develop. So I could give you multiple examples of when something doesn't go the way you initially want, how it creates these opportunities for new growth, new learning, new job opportunities. But when, in all transparency, when that bad thing happens, man, am I caught up in my feelings, total amnesia about what I'm saying to you now. And then usually, then I get all angry and pissy about it. But then after a while, I get back to, okay, let me just trust the process. So far, something good has happened.
You said that very well. And I will answer that with yes, that has happened plenty of times. The one that comes to mind that feels like it maybe made the biggest shift in my career was when I applied for internship. The Phoenix VA was not my #1 site. And it was a non-VA site that was my #1. And there were plenty of places that just didn't interview me for internship that I liked better. And I have to say that working at the Phoenix VA, maybe a VA that wasn't as high kind of prestige-wise in the VA system, it really shifted my career path. And it is what introduced me to true integrated mental health and collaborative care. And that's, as you see, that's where my career is and where my heart and my passion is. So that's one example that comes to mind. Is just it definitely happened for a reason. And a lot of people, and I don't use that phrase with patients at all, but a lot of people are not fans of that statement. And I think there is some kind of way to word that statement that is true, that when things happen that don't go as we planned, like you said, there's always an opportunity afterwards.
Hello? Okay. Good morning. My name is Taron Slack. I'm a first-year grad student, doctoral student in the counseling and school psychology program. Thank you for coming to speak with us. And I have two separate questions for you guys. For you, Dr. Buyck, when it comes to being a psychologist
question about what we look for in practicum students. I'll answer that with two answers. One is kind of what our program looks like, because it is a program decision. And then one is what I look for someone who's interested in health psychology and integrated mental health. As a program, our training program, I would say, looks for students who are motivated to learn. And that might sound like really obvious and cheesy. And it's interesting to see when people interview how open they are to new information and to learning. So someone who is open to new information, to learning new skills, to learning techniques that maybe they're not interested in or they won't use in the future, but to learning them for just the idea of learning. So someone who's open to new ideas and to learning, and someone who has a pretty good background in providing treatment. It doesn't need to be a specific type of treatment, but being able to talk about interventions that are utilized and kind of having an understanding of why you use that intervention. So maybe asking about what your theoretical meaning is or what kind of therapy you use, being able to talk about that and kind of apply that to the population that you're interviewing with. For integrated mental health, I would say we're looking for someone who is flexible. Someone who's not flexible would be miserable. So that's not only for us, that's for the student who's applying and who's looking to just have a variety of experiences that might not be a specialization in one specific problem or diagnosis, but is open to that flexible variety of experiences, and who wants to work with an interdisciplinary team. Some people, that's not their cup of tea, and that's fine, and integrated mental health is truly kind of recognizing that you are the mental health specialist on the team, and you're not the only specialist in the room, and be comfortable with that.
I was just talking with Dr. Peterson and telling him about how, I went into administration at the most exciting time of my research, and that I don't get, I miss doing research. I miss going after grants. I mean, I kind of do now, but not in, it's more funding opportunities to support initiatives, but it's not like going after, an NSF grant. I'm in my 4th year as dean, and I remember when I was having the conversation with the provost, when the offer was being made, and I, was asking about research. She said, what you'll find most challenging in being able to maintain a line of, and to maintain an active line of research as dean is that you don't control your time, and that is, my God, the truest statement ever, in that I just don't control my time. With that being said, I had a lot in the pipeline. I, would like to think that I was a Luke Skywalker as a researcher, and now as a dean, I want to be Yoda. Statistical, things where I might have done a repeated measures, ANOVA, and now folks are doing more sophisticated things. So I'm a dinosaur when it comes to SPSS, so I would not be of any value. The level of statistical sophistication that's being done now, what's expected in a preliminary analysis is well beyond what I used to do as the main, analysis, and I recognize that. I still publish, but maybe just one article a year as a first author. I think this year I might have 5 or 6 pubs, but I'm first author on 1 or 2 of them. When I travel is the only time I really get to work on an article. So it can take me a year and a half to get an article done. I did a final review on one flying down here, and I'll do another one flying up, so I hope to have 2 under review. But I've also made the decision that I just, I need to shift my scholarship to things that are more commensurate with being a dean, talking about leadership and, how do you transform an organization into an inclusive organization. I need to talk about more of those things. So I still think about scholarship, even though I may not have the time for research. But I do miss it. Fridays are blocked out for research, and they end up being filled with meetings. So probably 4 hours a month, if I'm lucky, is what I can spend, and I miss it.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Hi, my name is Kara. I'm a third-year doc student here. And my question relates to, So my question relates to academia and governmental institutions, how they traditionally have been predominantly white and male, and as psychologists, that's the amount of privilege that can come with that. And in your work, one with mentoring and the people you work with, what you do to kind of bring up people who are underrepresented in this field, and then also how you interact with and bridge to the community as well, because being in a university, the benefits we have doesn't always extend to our community, and I think we can improve that.
It's one of the challenging aspects of my job is really not just creating that inclusive environment, but really having the representation in the unit. Higher education, the foundation core of higher education was built on excluding folks and really as an environment basically for rich white men, right? That is how higher academia was built. So if we're going to change it, it has to be very, very intentional and disruptive, which becomes very uncomfortable, especially in a society where embracing social justice and talking about social justice is a sexy term, right? And one of the challenging things are social justice warriors, especially because they voted for Obama, that now have a belief that they have absolution of any implicit bias, white privilege, white fragility, any of that. And so it becomes very disruptive, or I'm very disruptive in looking at the implicit bias that is inherent even in the job search process. Because underrepresented minorities usually have different experiences as doc students. And so that leads to a different presentation as an applicant. And so, I'm trying to encourage viewing, and this is a question that I ask, what if we viewed diversity as a skill set the same way we would view somebody having some knowledge of a sophisticated statistical modeling? If we view diversity that way, then we could have an underrepresented minority coming out of a doc program with 1 publication, another candidate coming out with 10, and we would take that underrepresented minority because what they're bringing from a lived experience standpoint and the contribution to shifting an organization can actually be more transformational, particularly as we're leaning into the community. 2, we have to disrupt what's going on in the pipeline. So I'm having my faculty look at where are doc assistantships going, and what we found are the white students get the doc assistantships with the grant active faculty who are publishing. The black doc students get grad assistantships working in offices. So we have to disrupt that pipeline. And thirdly, we have to disrupt the privilege that is inherent in faculty. Faculty, we have a lot of privilege. And so if we're truly going to be inclusive, are we scheduling classes because it's convenient for our privileged lives? Or are we scheduling classes because that's what's going to work best for a student who is a single mom? Are we doing research that is convenient because of our privilege, are we doing research that's going to shift our time, effort, and actually where we have to drive 30 minutes to actually work with a population who is in desperate need of help. So those are the three things I would say.
Okay, we're about to close out our time here, but I would like to introduce a special guest who is about to leave the room and should stay, Miss Latoya. Come on up. So Dr. Daire has a scholarship that he has so generously provided to students, and this year it's very exciting that Latoya was our recipient of the last night, so it's not an initial, introduction, but Latoya will be honored tomorrow at a scholarship breakfast. Is that correct? And so she was the recipient of the scholarship. All right, so we're at the end of our time for the question and answer. The pizza will be arriving very soon, and so we encourage you to talk to people, talk to the site supervisors who are here, talk to our special guests, and get to learn more about the experiences that they have had and the leadership roles that they've had. And we thank you so much for coming this morning, and thank you again to our guests.